everybody, and welcome to Let's Have Words. My name is LARA Samuels. I am your host, and we are broadcasting live on WWHR Internet Media from the wonderful state of New Hampshire. So, I want to tell you a little bit about Let's Have Words. If you're new to the show, this is a show that primarily focuses on what we call on the show. I did not invent this phrase, but what we call on the show the triple threat. Okay, and the reason that we call it the triple threat is because there's three things, and they're all threats. That's why we call it the triple threat. And the three things are and threat to the planet. And the three things are biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. So those are the three major environmental problems that we're facing right now that are separate but overlap, right? So if you can imagine a Venn diagram, of course, go back to high school, you think about your little Venn diagrams, right? You can imagine that they all definitely intersect, but they're also separate. They have separate causes. For example, climate change definitely causes biodiversity loss, but there's also other things that cause biodiversity loss. And the thing, like, habitat destruction, pesticides, of course, which would come under the category of pollution. So these three things all go together. And the thing that they all have in common, of course, is human activity in one way or another. So it's basically the reason we're wrecking our planet is because of the way we live our lives, right? We live our lives in a way that is not sustainable. We're depleting resources faster than we can replace them. And we need to stop. It's that simple. We need to change direction. If we don't, it's not going to be a very good future, right? So it's going to be a bleak future. And when I think about my role in that, I'm thinking that there are a couple of choices that people that are that understand that this is what's happening right now. I think we have a few choices of how we can react. One way we can react is that we can just ignore it completely, and I think a lot of people are doing that, and I understand that. I understand that response. Just kind of, turn a blind eye to it and just carry on, and not really worry about. And I think some people in that category, they might think, well, we're going to solve this problem. I don't have to worry about it because the problem will get solved one way or another, So you have those sorts of people who aren't really paying attention, or they just, they're being very optimistic and they're thinking, well, humans, we can resolve anything. So, and then there's people that just want to take the doom and gloom, pathway, which, I'm not saying I never go full doom and gloom. I do, but when I think about doom and gloom, when we talk about these environmental problems, doom and gloom, I think, the reason that there's a reason for it. As long as there's a reason for it, I'm okay with doom and gloom. The reason is that we raise awareness so we can pay attention to the urgency. If we recognize how urgent things are, right, then we can take action. Okay, so that brings us to the third way we can react, which is how I think we generally promote on the show, which is that we can accept the fact that we're destroying the planet if we stay on our current trajectory, but we can do something about it, right? But I don't think it's just going to happen passively. I think we actually have to deliberately make it happen. So this is one of my little contributions to the movement here is to have this show where we discuss these issues. Once again, it's not meant to be a negative show. We take the position that we are wrecking the planet with our current lifestyles are unsustainable. There's a better way. There's a better way to do things that will lead to better lives for people, increase human health, increase happiness, increase nature, right? We can do this. We need the will. We have the technology. We have the ability, but we need the will, right? So that's the position of the show. So we do recognize that it's happening. So sometimes what we talk about in the show is we just sort of sort of raise awareness about what's happening. So that's sort of the dire, look at how dire things are piece of the show. But we also try to talk about how we can forge a path forward and what are some of the solutions to these problems, right? I don't feel like I'm not, what's funny is I'm not a born optimist. Like, I like to call myself a hopeful pessimist. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. I hold on to hope, but I'm pretty pessimistic that we're actually gonna achieve this. I've been on the planet long enough to be skeptical about human nature, and so I'm a hopeful pessimist. So I like to project that sort of hopeful pessimism on the show, and but the other piece of this show is that this is a call-in show. So, as a call-in show, that means that you can call in with your thoughts on this. And I have two rules when it comes to calling into the show. The first rule is that you are civil, okay? Because we engage in civil adult discourse on this show. That means we don't disrespect each other. We don't mudsling. We don't insult one another. We, stay on topic, and we try to have a reasonable conversation. That doesn't mean, however, that we can't be passionate. Passion is fine, but when it crosses the line into hostility and vitriol, that's when it's an issue. So we do stay civil on the show because we are adults and we can have adult conversations. And the other thing is that we need to stay on topic, right? I mean, there's a lot of topics we could cover, but we're not. The only topics we're covering on this show have to do with the triple threat, okay, which is a pretty broad topic, but still. Biodiversity loss, which is the big one for me. I focus a lot on that because that's my biggest concern. And also I don't think it gets enough attention. So I feel like I need to be an advocate in that department. Climate change, pollution. So that's what we discuss. So I'm not discussing other things, right? I'm not going to talk about, I don't know, abortion or gun rights or other political topics. We're not going there, okay? We're sticking with the planet. Another reason for this show, and I think it's important to mention this as well, is that I don't feel like the Earth, even though it's the most, I think it's the most important issue of our time. And I can only speak for the United States. When I speak, by the way, I'm talking about in the United States. Now, some of this stuff may be global, I'm not saying it's not, but I can only speak for the United States. And I feel like in the United States, for multiple reasons right now, we are not talking about the triple threat in any way, shape, or form. I mean, nobody's talking about it in any major way. When you hear the sort of mainstream media or the big political figures, the climate, biodiversity loss, pollution rarely gets a mention. So, and if it does get a mention, it seems like it's sort of in passing, like it's not. And for me, it should be the central organizing principle of our discourse. So for me, I can't stand it anymore, which is why I had to start this show. So I'm starting this show for a variety of reasons. One of them being that this issue is very important to me personally. Another part of it is I just don't think it's being discussed enough. So it's part of my mission to sort of get the Earth back on the agenda. It's the most important issue of our time, and as the days go by, and we're seeing all these signs of climate change, and there's still so much denial and resistance. We just can't keep ignoring what we're doing. We have to change, and we can change. Right? That's the thing. All right, this show is a call-in show. You can call in any time. So the number's on the screen. Feel free. I'd like you to try to stay on topic, and the topic being really anything having to do with the triple threat. However, I talk about specific things on this show, so it'd be nice if you could stay within the boundaries of what we're actually discussing. All right, so this show is divided into 3 parts. The first part is called Let's Do the Numbers. $65%. That's our first number tonight. By the way, on Let's Do the Numbers, we do numbers. Well, the Let's Do the Numbers is, of course, a satire. Well, it's not really a satire because it's serious. It's a serious segment of the show. But it is a satire in the sense that Let's Do the Numbers is a phrase that comes from the NPR. I guess it's not NPR. Anyway, it's one of the public radio networks. Anyway, Marketplace, right, where they do the numbers, and the numbers are, of course, the stock market. And one of the central premises? That's not right. One of the the central premise of this show, or one of them, is that we're always talking about the economy. You know, like take like the Strait of Hormuz, right? You read about what's happening in the Strait. Right away, it's like, what is it doing to oil prices, right? How about what is it doing to the environment? How about what is it doing to the animal life, like the abundant and diverse animal life that's in the Strait of Hormuz? Nobody's talking about that. Or what's it doing to human health? You know, what are all these explosions and munitions and sinkings? And, you know, the U.S. military, by the way, is one of the biggest polluters on the planet. I mean, and you know, the number of animals that I'm sure are affected by what's going on over there is doesn't even deserve a mention. It's all about the oil. What's it doing to the oil prices? What's it doing to the economy? I mean, it's like, I feel like we've gone crazy and all we can talk about is the economy, as if like that's the only thing that matters. What about nature? What about human health? These things don't matter? Of course they do. And to me, they're more important, which is why I have this segment called Let's Do the Numbers. But instead of talking about the stock market, we're talking about the earth. Water scarcity. This is a big problem. You know, I'm because of climate change, because of, pumping, groundwater pumping and mining, commercial extraction, all sorts of reasons. Water is becoming scarcer, like water that we can use. Of course, the data centers, it's just all kinds of reasons. But we first of all, we all know what the root of the problem is, right? There's just too many people on the planet all fighting over not enough resources, and it is the position of the show, however, that we can't really address the population situation. I mean, the population is going to do what the population does. I don't think you can address that problem. I don't. I mean, I think you have to work on the consumption end, right? Because because we're over consuming, right? And that part of it we can affect. We can affect the overconsumption. We can't really do anything about the overpopulation. So even though I know that that's the elephant in the room, we can't do anything about it. So if you go that direction, you hit a dead end, right? So you got to focus on, okay, how do we meet the needs of humans and nature? How can we change how we do things so that we are operating in a nature positive, non-polluting way, and we're still able to meet our basic needs and have a decent, and live decently, right? This is the central problem. So just so you know, I should mention that more often, that I'm aware that what's really going on here is just that there's too many people on the planet, but that is not a problem we can solve. So I don't try to, okay? So we just talk about the overconsumption piece. All right, so where was I? Oh, yes, water scarcity. I don't know. I'm hearing about lakes drying up and rivers dry. Every time I turn around, there's some other water problem. The desalination plants use a ton of energy, and they're not very efficient, and we're polluting our groundwater. And so I read this, what I thought was a heartbreaking story, and I'm starting off on a low note tonight. Doesn't mean everything we're going to talk about is sad. 65%, though, is our first number tonight, and 65% of springs scattered throughout the Great Basin in the Mojave Desert are degraded. So that is, Nevada and Utah and that area. Which is mostly covered with desert. You got the Great Basin, which is, and the Mojave Desert area. It's a desert environment, right? But there's these little springs that sort of bubble up from below the earth, and the groundwater comes up, and they form these little pools, and these pools are supporting unique wildlife, fish and crustaceans and insects and all kinds of things. And these animals have been sort of evolved to live in these little places, right? And very, very interesting. To me, that's just beautiful. I mean, to me, just thinking about these little isolated ecosystems, sprouting up in the middle of the desert, for me, that's enough. I mean, I care. I just automatically care because it's so beautiful and amazing. And these animals, of course, there's some core principles on this show. Another core principle. I'm bringing up a lot of core principles tonight. Another core principle of the show is that animals have a right to exist. They don't have to prove themselves to us. They don't have to prove their worth. We do talk a lot about why we need biodiversity, why it matters to humans, but ultimately, animals are under no obligation to prove themselves useful to us. They are here, and they have just as much right to exist as we do. It's a social justice issue, and that is what matters. And to me, biodiversity is beautiful. Animals and plants and all the other creatures on the planet. I can't think of anything more precious, anything more beautiful. And I don't think that we need to prove somehow that these little springs in the desert are somehow important to, or as important as our groundwater pumping and our extraction, our economy, whatever. I don't think that case has to be made. But I do want to say that biodiversity is, and I have another number here that's gonna address that. So actually, let's hold off to the next one. Okay, so 65% of springs scattered throughout the Great Basin in the Mojave Desert are degraded. So these animals are going extinct. Aquatic animals that depend on these springs are threatened with extinction. So, these beautifully, carefully evolved, balanced ecosystems are being destroyed for our greed, basically, because we could do things differently. We don't have to deplete them, but we are depleting them. And I fear that we will, right? That we will. And that's just more nature lost on this planet. And to me, that is a travesty. And it's, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of that humans with all of our amazing talents and these amazing brains that we have, that we can't operate without destroying our life support system and without destroying the other animals that we share the planet with. So that we're kicking it off with super sad story tonight. Okay. Next number is 53%. Loss of rodent diversity results in, I should give you some background. I just take notes, so sometimes I have to kind of poke around and see where things are. Okay, so this is from a paper by the Chinese Academy of Science, and so this is some research that took place in China, and the research paper found that 53% loss. That's our number, right? Let's do the numbers. After all, 53% loss of rodent diversity. So this isn't loss of rodents. This is loss of rodent diversity. Okay, so that just means there's fewer different types of rodents, but not necessarily fewer rodents, right? Resulted in single species monopoly on hantavirus. So we heard about hantavirus recently in the news, and the thing is that when we lose diversity, let's see, it increases the viral transmission to humans. This is also happening. The same concept is happening with Ebola as well, due to deforestation and other environmental, other human activities that are degrading the environment are resulting in increased transmission of Ebola to humans. And there are other examples as well. So this is just, we were talking about biodiversity and how biodiversity is, doesn't need a defense, really. It's just it is a defense, right? We got to take care of the other animals and plants that we share the planet with. There's no doubt, but there's also some practical reasons, and so if you need a practical reason, it's without biodiversity, what do we get? More disease. More Ebola, more hantavirus. The paper said the boundaries, it was written in the paper, that the boundaries between humans, animals, and ecosystem health, the boundaries have vanished. And this is because we have destroyed so many places that we're interacting more with possible reservoirs of disease. So we are increasing the likelihood that there will be outbreaks of deadly microbes. And this is what happens when you deplete. This is one thing. This is only one thing here. When you deplete biodiversity. So if the fact that animals are just beautiful and the fact that they have a right to exist doesn't do it for you, well, there you go. We also, I don't think anybody wants to see more suffering with, microbial diseases. And when you increase biodiversity, you decrease the chances of transmission, and you decrease, also, I think you dilute the potential virulence of the microbe as well. And this goes for pests, right? Increasing biodiversity can decrease, when I say pests, I always put it in quotes, because I don't believe in pests. I don't believe in that term. I don't like the term. But, it goes for ticks and mosquitoes and mice and rats and things too, that, if you have increased biodiversity, you have fewer pest issues. It's the same principle. Dilution. You have the more biodiversity you have, it's like protection, right? It's just like there's so much biodiversity that no one thing can take over, It's like the same principle of when you grow like a monoculture, right? Then you're more likely to have that entire crop wiped out. But if you have diversity, then you have more small impacts, but you don't have these giant, these giant crops being destroyed all at once. It's the same principle. So biodiversity is protects us, right? Protects us. All right. We're still on Let's Do the Numbers, and let's see, 30% of electricity. Oh, renewables right now, at this moment in time, according to the Energy Progress Report put out by the International Energy Agency, and other global energy agencies of various kinds say that, renewables are now 30% of electricity globally, that's good news, right? That's our last number. We're going to end on a positive note. Although, but major regional disparities exist. So obviously, green energy is not being adopted everywhere in equal volume. And it's really not penetrating into other sectors. So this is for electricity generation, such as heat and transportation, energy efficiency. These things are actually slowing down rather than taking off. So maybe it's not such good news. But it is good news because I happen to believe that sustainable energy, green energy, call it what you will, renewable energy, I think it's unstoppable. I think people are realizing that it's just inherently cheaper. It has to be. I mean, it has to be inherently cheaper. The sun is free, right? It's just inherently cheaper than oil and other fossil fuels. It's safer. It allows us to be independent. It's decentralized, so it speaks to the whole independence of people, wanting to just generate their own energy in their backyard, and not rely on these global, markets that, are unstable and unpredictable and all of that. I think people are just realizing all the benefits of clean energy. I think it's unstoppable. I think that no matter what, we in this country right now, we have an administration that's very anti-nature, anti-green energy. I don't think anybody can deny that. You just look at their record, just look at what's being said. But unfortunately for them, I think that they cannot stop the tide of the green energy movement, and hopefully also of the nature positive movement, which is something I'm very interested in and we'll discuss often on this show. Anyway, this is a call-in show. Feel free to call in anytime. You can talk. What's your favorite number of the week? Just, did you come across an interesting number that made you think about the environment, about anything having to do with the triple threat? Please call in. Numbers on the screen. My name is LARA Samuels. This is Let's Have Words. We love having people call in. We love to have discussions. That's what it's all about, right? Good, solid discourse. Even when you disagree, right? This is a lost art. We want to bring back the art of having real adult conversations, and being polite and loving to one another, even if we have differences of opinions, right? All right. So now, I know you've all been waiting. It's time for What's on Lara's Mind. What's on Lara's mind tonight? What's on Lara's mind? All right. Well, what's on my mind? A lot of things. So I had a really, really hard time narrowing this down this week. I've been thinking about so many things. My brain has just been all over the place, thinking about all sorts of things. Some of those things are scary, and I don't want to talk about them. But of the things that were not scary, there was still a lot of stuff. So what I thought I'd talk about tonight. And by the way, did I mention this is a call-in show? So feel free to call in and give your opinion on this. I'll try to be as concise as possible. I do want to get to the third segment of the show, which we don't always get to, which is the news portion. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, and so maybe this will be a two-parter. Maybe we'll start it tonight, and I'll talk a little bit more about it next time. But I was thinking about how I'm politically homeless right now. And, I live in the United States, and in the United States, we have two parties. We have the Democrats, we have the Republicans. There's other parties, but really those are the two dominant parties, and for some, it's very stubbornly. We're very stubbornly, one or the other. So even if you decide, well, my experience has been, that I have supported candidates that were not members of those two parties, but I ultimately end up voting Democratic. I've never voted Republican in my whole life. I vote for Democrats. However, the Democrats consistently disappoint me, but I just feel like I don't have a choice most of the time, which is very sad. I think this is a very sad way, to exist politically. I mean, I wish I lived in a world where I could just vote for the person that I felt best represented my interests, but that's just not realistic, right? But I'm having a really hard time right now because I feel politically homeless, and there's lots of things I could discuss, lots of pieces of evidence or lots of supporting evidence as to why I feel politically homeless. But I want to talk about the main reason I feel politically homeless, because I just kind of realized this the other day, and I realized that what I feel right now, and maybe you feel this way too. What I feel right now is that we're at a crossroad. We're like a serious crossroad. Like, things are accelerating quickly. I feel like things are changing very fast right now. This is a period of acceleration. And they're going two possible directions. Now, I know nothing is this simplistic, right? I'm just talking about, in order to think about things, sometimes you need a framework, right? So this is my framework. I'm thinking that we're at a crossroads, and they're two completely diametrically opposite, directions that we could go. And one of those directions is what I call the winner-loser direction. And that's the direction that Trump and his people want to take us. And that is, let's see, what's down that road. So if we go down that path, we're talking about, crony capitalism. We're talking about sort of a techno-capitalist kind of society. We're talking about winners and losers. So the people, like, everybody's an entrepreneur, right? There's not very many workers. There's just basically everybody's an entrepreneur. And people, the stock market is really important, and wealth is the organizing principle, and people are just simply competing for wealth. And, because of automation, there's not a lot of jobs for people. So people, in order to survive in this society, basically you have to be an entrepreneur, and you compete with other entrepreneurs, and nobody really hires anybody, and basically what I mean by winners, so in this world, I think there's a few winners, a lot of losers. I think the biggest loser of all is the environment in that world. I think that when your whole world is focused on, buying and selling and trading and betting and all of this stuff, I think your attention to what's happening in the environment is minimal. And so I think it leads to more biodiversity loss, more climate change. I think in that world, though, it doesn't really matter to people, because I think that they can escape it, right? They can build bunkers, underground bunkers, so they don't really care. They get whatever the consequences of this sort of world, which, what would the consequences be? Environmental destruction, a lot of conflict, a lot of angry people, right? But the wealthy people can sort of insulate themselves from that. They don't have to worry about it. They don't care, because they have all the power, all the money, all the land. They can just build fortresses and just insulate themselves from it and enjoy their lives and not worry about it, right? Well, the rest of us suffer. So I really think that if you take, now once again, I know this is a very simplistic view, so bear with me here, because I'm saying that's like the idealized, logical conclusion if you go down that path. But and I'm very afraid of that direction. I don't think that is the kind of world I want to live in. And I think that all signs point to a movement in that direction on the right. Now, the other possible direction, which is the direction I advocate for, is the livable planet. So this is where we put nature and human health at the center of our decision making. We figure out how to satisfy human needs and nature needs at the same time. Actually, satisfying the needs of nature is also like being nature positive is also being human positive, because you're actually having more nature around is better for human health, physical health, mental health. We can build an economy around that. I'm not talking about by the way, I'm not talking about a socialist capitalist split. That's not what I'm talking about. I think there's room for capitalism and socialism, and I think the mixed economy is what I would personally be interested in bringing about a capitalism that's more of a stakeholder capitalism where people participate, so it's more democratic. It's not like the shareholder capitalism, the crony capitalism, right, where it's all a bunch of people that are connected and they give each other ways to make money, and and it's a big scheme, it's a big gambling operation, Ponzi scheme and all that. That's the type of capitalism that we have, pretty much, or it's a big part of what we have right now. I'm talking about stakeholder capitalism, where it's much more subdued and people have there's more participation from multiple sectors, right? And there's a big social responsibility piece. So like companies would have, like making a profit is not the only purpose of the company. The company also exists to create a better world, to build a better community, right? So there's more than just the profit motive. And I know these sorts of companies already exist. I understand that. So, but anyway, there's room for that, and there's room for some things, I think, being socialized, such as to satisfy the needs of people. So I'm not talking about a socialist capitalist split here. I'm talking about the livable planet versus winners or losers. Okay, I want to wrap it up here because I want to get to the news, and we'll continue this conversation next week, or not. I shouldn't say next week. I should say next time. We do this live. We do it every other week live. We're here on Thursdays live every other week, and then we do a rebroadcast in between. So I want to talk about why I feel politically homeless, because I want to build the livable planet. That's the path I want to go on. It's hopeful. It's positive. It's a direct, it's in direct opposition to this other, direction that we seem to be. Some people seem to be embracing. And I think it's the only way to go. I think it's like we don't really have a choice if we want to have a better future. If we want to have a better future, we need to preserve our life support system, and try to figure out how we can satisfy everyone's needs. But I don't think the Democrats. So I think that the Republicans are decidedly going down the sort of capitalist dystopia, winners and losers world, right? A world of bunkers and a bunch of conflict and climate, disasters and everything. But I think that the Democrats want to go. They don't want to go forward. They want to go back. See, I think they're being reactive. They want to say, look how crazy things have gotten. We need to take things back to the way they were when things were more stable. I don't want to go back. I think we need to take this opportunity, this moment of chaos, to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat and move forward and change things dramatically and radically. Not just to go back to business as usual. The way that Democrats talk about what affordability and all of that, it's almost like they're not accepting the fact that the economy is changing like quickly, and we just can't use the same old stuff that worked in the past. It's not going to work in the future. I'm all for for people having rights. Like, I'm all for workers' rights. You know, I've always been on the side of that coin. And I am a worker. I'm a working class person, right? And that's where, and I care about working class people. But I'm afraid we're not going to have any workers in the future. So when Democrats talk about raising the minimum wage, and they talk about, unions, I feel like they're talking about the past. We got to figure out a way forward. And it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same old crap. So I feel politically homeless because I feel like I don't want to hang around people who just want to take us back to the way things were. And furthermore, they're leaving out the environment. I can't tell you how angry I get when I hear about, oh, we're going to build a bunch of houses. It's like, okay, I'm all for housing people. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have homes. But are we going to build those houses sustainably? Because we can't take any more land from animals. We've already taken enough land. There's already been enough habitat destruction. We can't just keep destroying more habitat to provide homes for people. We have to build in a nature positive way. We have to build differently, and that's not being discussed. So politically homeless. All right. Anyway, last segment, really quick, because we only have a few minutes. Peruse the news.
It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news.
Let's see. MIT paper argues that the energy transition in the United States is following the trajectory of the IRA. Okay, so that was a Biden era legislation. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is a really weird name for it anyway. But the Inflation Reduction Act, had some goals for, transitioning to the green energy future. And apparently, despite Trump's efforts to discredit and destroy green energy, it's proceeding, according to MIT. It's the energy transition is following the trajectory of the IRA. So that's nice. Ha ha. It's happening. That's the point, right? Good news. I also read that the European Parliament is calling biodiversity a strategic investment priority. I don't know what the hell that means, but that sounds good. If you're putting biodiversity, if you are putting biodiversity, if you're building it into your plans for investment, I think that sounds good. You want to bring, in order for us to build a nature positive future, we need to get, people with money on board to do great things. And so I think that sounds good. I don't know what it means, but I thought it was sounding good, so I wanted to bring it up. Okay, a third article I read. Let's see. The confectionery industry, these are the people that make sweets and chocolates and things like that, is partnering with some nonprofit conservation organizations in Malaysia, looks like, in order to figure out how sort of these plantations that grow palm oil and very damaging to the environment, by the way, can coexist, because I guess they use a lot of palm oil in confections. I guess that's what the connection is there. These plantations can coexist with biodiversity, and they're monitoring, they're investing money and time. These companies, I think it's one company or maybe it's multiple companies. I don't know. They're investing time and money and effort into monitoring biodiversity in the area, and figuring out how they can, grow palm oil without destroying any further, anyway, the local biodiversity. I hope they're also thinking nature positively. So nature positively would be you're not only trying to preserve what was there, you're actually trying to promote biodiversity. So you end up with more nature, right? More nature. That's what nature positive means. They have all these ways of tracking biodiversity, really interesting. There's all kinds of, this is a great area of innovation. Like, how do we track biodiversity? They're using like drones, of course. They have these like bioacoustic things where they can actually assess the level of biodiversity by the sound. Of course, they use cameras. All kinds of DNA techniques, all kinds of interesting, innovative ways of monitoring biodiversity. And so they're using all of those things to, in an effort to figure out how they can coexist. So look at that. 3 positive things I read this week involving industry and government and to people, right? Because despite our administration's effort to kill green energy, it's going forward anyway. So, yay for us, yay for for the livable planet. There are people all over the world that care about this, making a difference. I really feel like we can transition to the livable planet. I think that we need more people, though, to advocate for it, people in power. And I think we need a comprehensive plan to get us there. And the show is just one little piece of that, of course. And this is a place where we talk about those things. So, all right. Well, I'm Lara Samuels. This is Let's Have Words. We broadcast live from WWHR Internet Media Thursday nights. We're live every other Thursday. We do a rebroadcast in between. It's a call-in show. You're always welcome to call in and discuss these things. That is the purpose of the show, is to have conversation. And I always end the show by reminding people that these days it feels to me like being kind to other people is a radical act. So I try to be radically kind, not just to people, but also to animals. And I hope you will be radically kind as well. All right. Have a good week.